Hello viewers and welcome to another episode of Lancer Custom Werks, where I will be discussing the various mech builds you could make and play with Lancer. So, Pegasus is currently HORUS 1 and only artillery frame, because of its affinity with gun. Its trait is gun, its core is gun, its license is gun, its everything is gun. To explain further, Pegasus only usable trait, with extra emphasis on usable, will turn all damage dice into their average number. This is extremely helpful if you also know the exact health of the enemy, because you can then commit the exact number of actions needed to destroy them. And if you are slightly off with your number, you can use the U-Shafty to add more damage, or even use it to finish off weak grunts rapidly. Pegasus's specialty is quite literally gun. Yet, despite that, Pegasus is also perfectly suitable as a melee fighter, because its trait isn't restricted to ranged weapon at all. All of its stat is also right on the average line, so there really isn't an obvious weakness to it, allowing people to make all kinds of builds with it. Also, we finally have a decent sensor range to talk about after 3 episodes of Mr. I Will Rip Your Face Off. Now, before I talk about the builds, I will be making some changes to this episode and all future ones. Previously, all I do is gather up a bunch of builds from my players and then talk about them. This does bring quite a confusion to some newer players because it's all over the place and the standard build for the mech isn't quite established. While there is no such thing as standard build in Lancer, I think some categorization is in order. For the following builds, I will be primarily categorizing them with the 5 roles: artillery, striker, controller, support, and defender. Pegasus is primarily an artillery mech, which means it's good with ranged attack, but due to Lancer modular mech building system, you can easily modify almost any mech for any role and still do extremely well in it. The role is based on both what role the builds are made for, and what their creators have intended them to do, and if a category is big enough to have subcategories, I will be further separating the builds into those categories too. Anyway, let's get started, since there's a total of 64 build submissions. Let's quickly analyze them. In the next few dozens builds, you will notice that a lot of builds have the 3 following things: autogun, hunter lock, and Sisyphus class NHP. Autogun, as I have explained numerous times, is basically free damage as long as anyone is standing within range 15 of you. Also, fun fact, since autogun automatically activates at the end of your turn, if you get stunned or jammed, you can just have them end at the end of your turn first then fire the autogun. This trick also works for anything that gets triggered to activate at the end of your turn, keyword, triggered. You can't just shove anything that works as free action if it requires direct activation from you as the pilot, for example, Uncle class Comp Con. Hunter Lock is yet again more free damage if you hit, and Sisyphus is a multi-function system that can aid you, support allies, and endanger the enemies by directly manipulating their D20 dice. There's so much shenanigans you can do with this NHP. Anyway, let's get on with the most common build you will find for Pegasus, artillery builds, because it's what it does best, shooting people. In these builds, you will find not just long-ranged weapons, but also systems and talents to further boost the firepower and capabilities of these guns. Let's take a look at an example. EXTRUDE Grunt is about as close as it is to a very standard Pegasus build, with all its licensed weapons and then some, along with Sisyphus to increase its hit chance or decrease enemy success rate. Besides the autogun, Smartgun is an incredibly accurate long-ranged weapon, same with the Oracle, and while Mimic Gun is finicky, at its maximum potential, it can deal 11 damage at range 20, which is as ridiculous as it sounds. It also works with every single ranged weapon type talent, which is why there's a Senti main here despite nothing else works with the talent. And finally, it can climb straight up a wall quickly with Mag Clam, because of course a creepy crawling fucker has to crawl up the goddamn wall. And this is one of the more tamed examples. This is point, click, delete. You might have noticed that it has a Cyclone pulse rifle. That's not the main protagonist of this build. The Unraveler with auto stab and OP caliber is. Unraveler is a gun that deals more damage if it can kill or structure the target. This is where Pegasus's trait shines the most, because its base damage is now 7, and with Eye of Horus, you will know the NPC health point directly, which means as soon as someone's health reached 7 or below, they are dead. And that's not counting damage bonus from OP caliber, Hunter Lock, and Lucifer, which could turn the base 7 damage to 24, based on the heat cap of this Pegasus, which can kill practically anything. Now you probably realized why the prototype weapon and Cyclone pulse rifle are the backup weapon. Thankfully, not every build is that ridiculous, Sometimes you just need something that works well, and that's how most Pegasus pure artillery build are like. This is how to make Pegasus boring, which is kinda an appropriate name. It has autogun, smart gun, Gandiva with stabilizer and Neurolink to reach range 23, all are accurate and practical weapons that work all the time, but maybe a bit boring. Hunter Lock is here again, and this time there's TLALOC class NHP. TLALOC class NHP basically gives any attack you missed a second chance to hit something, very good and practical, but again, probably a bit boring. But this build works, it works well, and is not relying on an incredibly finicky set of actions to perform its main role. This the average Pegasus build. One good thing I have always mentioned with autogun is that it lets you spend your action on other things, in this case, firing the bolt thrower, and stabilizing to reload it without spending a turn not shooting something. The bolt thrower is going to throw out 21 damage max thanks to OP Cal, Roland Chamber, and Nuclear Cavalier, and explosive vent makes it a danger to stand nearby when stabilizing. I recommend overcharging every turn because this Peggy does have 10 heat cap after all, just enough to handle the 4th overcharge heat cost. This is Railgun Peg, that's the name I think. Thanks to Peggy trait, the Railgun with OP Cal will always deal 11 AP damage, and since Railgun is a line weapon, this means it can shoot straight through a size 1 cover to hit someone directly without difficulty. But, here's the thing, you can only attack someone if you have line of sight to them, so if you are trying to shoot a guy through a wall, that's not gonna work. You can shoot straight through a cover to hit someone, because you can still see the guy hiding behind the cover. Unless, you have something to ignore that, like seeking tag, or arcing. I think you guys should know what's the next upgrade path for this build already. This is Spectrum Sprint. The point of this build is that with Uncle, this build can perform triple mount barrage every turn. Colony Missile is kinda an underrated weapon because of its low damage, but you basically will find a hard time missing with it due to its special ability of eating any leftover difficulty. Thanks to Uncle, even on turns where you have to stabilize to reload, you can fire it anyway. And here's the rest of the pure artillery builds. I didn't really talk about these in detail because they mostly do the same thing in different ways, which is to pump out as much damage at range as possible. But, most Peggy won't be running a pure artillery build due to its sensor range, making it just as good at running support and control via tech action, drone, and anything else that relies on sensor range. Let's talk about artillery controllers, which both shoot the enemies and inflict terrible effects on them to impair them. This sure is taking a while. Each build has 5 seconds spare so you guys can catch up. Anyway, let's start with Pegasus. It still has autogun, integrated nexus, and a goddamn howitzer, but it also has 2 tech systems that massively upgrade its invade. 10 sensor range isn't very long, but it's more than enough to invade anyone that stands too close. Heck, you can even puppet system your own allies to move them around. And even on turn where you keep throwing out quick tech or full tech, autogun and nexus will always be firing. This is I am what I know, and this is too goddamn long. You are probably asking, why I put this build as artillery controller. It's because this build has a mimic gun linked to 4 goddamn talents, meaning with one shot, the mimic gun can absolutely destroy a target's capability in combat. Also, it has lesson of held image, which basically gives free lock on every turn. Oh yeah, this thing can also fly, as if that wasn't bad enough. Here's another mimic gun build with some defensive invisibility, open door makes save even more painful. Here's another mimic gun build that can shut down any reaction-based NPC with Wandering Nightmare. And here is Peggy of the Hill, which not just has tech systems for more invade options, Hunter Logic and Neurospike are both rather defensive invade systems, but also a heavy gunner machine gun combo to stop anyone from moving. Thanks to Peggy's trait, the heavy machine gun now deals a constant 11 damage, 15 with OP caliber for once per round, and while heavy gunner talent mostly have that, it's still quite painful with immobilization. You are also going to see heavy machine guns a lot here because it deals a lot of damage. This is Salt the Earth, which has a ton of assassin drones and turret drones, because putting guns on your mech isn't the only way to have more firepower. With 10 sensor range, those drones could move quite far, and if their firepower isn't enough, there's always Annihilation Nexus to augment them and threaten anyone that gets too close. Of course, yes, a Hydra would work better, but Peggy is not sloppy in being a drone controller either. Here's another drone. Peggy also has a bunch of assassin drones. Lotus Projector is also another method to know the target's health and prevent them from hiding and being invisible, more if multiple NPC are in its effect radius, but it has a chance of getting shot down. And another drone Peggy, there's just so many assassin drones. This build also has Pepcock, which is an amazing anti-tech tool to safeguard your allies from being hacked with a rather amazing side effect, and Black Spot, which can lock on target on a crit. This is Penta main, basically a Peggy with 5 goddamn light nexus. I put this in artillery controller category because with Senti main, light nexus can bring a ton of pain that can render the enemy ineffective quickly. Combine that with Gunslinger to add in the pain of dying too, and with Azura and Heat Fall overcharge, that's a lot of bees. Another light nexus spam Pegasus for reference. This is Spark of Brilliance. Aside from its invade upgrade systems and turret drone, the dual burst launcher this build has can be surprisingly painful on the enemies by inflicting impaired status on them. Combine that with Stormbringer, and you can really knock NPC around. And that's really how most artillery controller builds for Pegasus will be like. Its sensor range is just decent, and thus it's good to take advantage of that with drone and tech systems. On the other side of the coin is artillery support builds, which has a slight focus on aiding their allies, though with the sheer amount of weapon mounts that Pegasus have, killing everyone before they hurt your allies also count as a form of support. In fact, just having Sisyphus kinda gives a mech capability in supporting and controlling both allies and enemies already, so I'm counting every other system only instead. This is Pegapony, because of course there has to be a Pegasus build that's an actual horse. With mule harness and Fomorian frame, this Peggy can actually carry someone and aid them with their talents and systems, as so stabilizer is especially useful in providing overshield. This is just like in Greek myth, the flying horse has a gun. It has Pepcock to support any ally with low E defense, turret drones to boost their damage, along with Black Spot and Held Image to provide lock on which spotter can take advantage to further support allies. This is Pega's sister, it has Athena to see through wall and disguise, and locking onto people, and LB/OC cloaking field to turn everyone invisible. It also like to stick around bonded people and has leader, which is always good for support. This is, by the way, you know nothing, it has accelerate to move people faster or away from things, and stasis bolt, which can eat incoming attack for both you and others. As you can see, most of these artillery support builds are kinda dependent on whether your allies need it. Spotter isn't exactly useful for a striker that want to head straight in fact, all stationary support tools are useless to striker. In general, your team will probably have a balanced composition of every role, so your tools will never be completely useless, but sometimes things just don't work out. It's why for the most part, if you are building for an artillery support Pegasus, make it so that the support tool can benefit you most of the time. This advice could probably be used by most non-support frames. The same could be said for artillery defender Peggy builds too, which is even rarer because while Pegasus doesn't die in one hit, it doesn't exactly have any defensive trait at all, unlike proper defender mechs like Drake and Saladin. So, selecting systems that provide obstruction and covers work very well for Peggy, because more cover is always good for an artillery frame. Now, I hope you remember that Peggy's trait works perfectly fine for melee weapon too, because we are going to step in the striker Peggy builds. Sure, Peggy isn't made for close range combat, but it isn't terrible at it either thanks to its universally useful trait. Also, you might notice that some of the following builds have no melee weapons. That's because I defined striker builds as builds you want the enemies to get close. Anyway, this is Crafty in the middle, a Pegasus equipped with a DD288. With OP Cal, this means that at charged mode, the DD288 can deal 26 damage on hit. And you can get more damage by putting down javelin rockets in a line, causing another 9 damage for 35 maximum damage, enough to kill practically everything in one turn, and is absolutely hilarious because it looks like this. This scene honestly couldn't fit any better. This build is also made to grapple and choke life out of people with Brawler and Zheng systems, so you really want to stay close to someone to choke the life out of them. This is mass-produced EVA 14, finally, the joke went in full circle. You want to cosplay as a MP EVA? This build got you. You have bulwark mods to ignore everything on the way to your target, AT field to protect you, and your weapons are all lands of long inus. One can be thrown with a progressive knife, one can stab multiple people, and one can deal big damage. You also have SMN to deal with even Titanic-sized target, and Briario's frame so you can't die if you keep getting lucky. In fact, there's 2 goddamn MP EVA build. This one is far more angrier and lethal with Secomet class NHP, and can in fact bloody fly. This is Demon Steed, a striker Peggy with 30 goddamn health, which is absolutely ridiculous. It also has 2 auto guns, so it can bludgeon people every turn with its nanocarbon sword without worrying about those that stand too far. This is HMG Uncle Peg, that's the name I think, also works on the same principle, except with a heavy machine gun that's also controlled by an uncle, because it turns out 3 difficulty isn't that much worse than 1 difficulty. Which means this build can spend all actions on anything that isn't shooting, including activating Sisyphus every turn. This is Dreambreaker, also the same build, except the heavy machine gun has phase ready mod this time. Combine that with Eye of Horus to prevent the target from being invisible, and you could basically shoot a target behind a wall without any loss in accuracy. And yet another dual auto gun HMG Peggy build, this time with HMG being super massive. The overkill is useful when the weapon attack crit, so you don't get unlucky with the roll. Also, it can jump. Here's We Are One, also working on the same principle, except this time it's a kinetic hammer with Uncle for smashing. By the way, kinetic hammer is one of the few weapon that's in direct upgrade over a GMS weapon, like the heavy melee weapon, it's just plain better in every way. Here's another Uncle kinetic hammer Peggy, which looks exactly the same as the previous one. And this is Peggle Crown 2, a freaking monster of a build is what I would call it. You basically just want to grapple a very unfortunate fellow, and then explode. Just explode all your bristle crown until they are nothing but ash. And if your game master gives you biological targets, time for a pest control. And last of the pure striker build, this is Cursed Est, which is just a Pegasus dressed up as Blackbeard, so it's good at grappling and beating the shit out of people. Honestly, the name felt more fitting with the previous build. But hey, guess what? Unlike most striker mech, Peggy has proper sensor range, which means more shenanigans when built as striker controller. This is 1812 Overture, and it has Beckoner, which means it can swap place with another character in range 10 and proceed to destroy them with all its cone weapons, while its allies destroy the lonely target. Why even walk when you can just teleport right onto someone's face and skip over all the pesky obstacle? Unsurprisingly, it's not the only build that does that. This one set people on fire. And this one has a goddamn DD288, you can't teleport yourself with Beckon when slowed though, remember that. It also has Thinking Tomorrow's Thought, so you can hack someone before you punch them for maximum damage. This is Year of the Dragon, which is a Pegasus with Vlad systems shoved in, and it still works almost just like it. Nail Gun, to immobilize people, ramming people onto Webjaw, to immobilize people, and throw explosive caltrip at people, to immobilize people. Sure, a Vlad might works better at this role, but guess what, it can't exactly manipulate probability like this Peggy, unless someone shoves a Sisyphus into a Vlad. This is Crypto Miner Unicorn, also a Peggy with tons of Vlad systems, and also a freaking combat drill to drill people's face in. Sure, this is far more tamer than DD288, but you can use it every turn reliably unless you want to chance for overkill. This is also another combat drill Peggy, with charged stake to pin an unfortunate fellow in place, along with accelerate and blink charges to get fast or more around. As you can see, even when built for close quarter combat, Peggy can be quite an effective controller. If anything, it probably works better because with range 10, you have to get close for more controller action anyway, and the same could be said for striker support. This is 3 difficulty isn't real and can't hurt you. I know it looks exactly like most other dual autogun HMG Peggy builds, but this one has Black Thumb to patch up other nearby mechs, and Technophile to make sure the mech is still running when its pilot is out. Like most artillery support builds, this striker support build is only stepping a tiny bit into the support side for just helping its allies a little bit. And this is the social aspect, a striker with pepcock, though for the most part you will be shooting black spot for lock-on and accuracy, and then smash them with hammer for a massive 10 damage. And, last but not least, the striker defender builds, both of which funny enough, have Leviathan heavy assault cannon to murder anyone that steps too close, and have Drake systems to provide plenty of stationary defense, like portable bunker and Aegis shield generators. I'm actually not even sure if these two count as striker build, but as someone has to move closer to these Pegasus because they aren't going anywhere, I guess it does count. And that should be all 64 of the Pegasus builds. Yes, I didn't cut out any this time around because I figured with my smoother review methods this time, I don't need to. Once again, big shout out to everyone that has submitted their build submissions, and good lord, the amount of potential shenanigans I found in these builds are amazing. As always, you can take some of the builds out and modify to your own liking, let your creativeness spread so the world could see what awesome builds you have unleashed. Oh right, here's the next target for the next episode, and with everything done, I will see you all next time. Hello there, if you like this video, please subscribe to my channel and click that notification bell button. If you really want to support my channel, you could visit my Patreon page, or buy me some coffee, links in the description. Anyway, have a nice day.